What's up, guys? Welcome to the Walk On Warrior podcast, where we promote student athletes to get to the next level, and we inform them, and they have just all the good stuff. Listen, I am your host, Coach Z. Super excited for our guest, but before we get to that, listen, hey, want to make sure you guys go over to our YouTube channel. Make sure. So listen, we're preparing young student athletes for next level success, but we're dropping videos every single week, man. And also, go to dustinzeman.com. We got a course out right now that if you're looking to take it a little bit of a step further, you guys can work with me personally on our route to get to the next level. That's our goal, and so on. All right. All righty. Listen, hey, I'm super excited for our guest today. He's the head strength and conditioning performance coach at Arizona State University. And listen, he is one of the best, and I'm super excited to have him on. And it is Joe Connolly. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, so I always like to have an icebreaker to start these podcasts. And so you were at South Carolina.
I was, yes.
You're at South Carolina, and that's with the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier. How was it working under him?
He prefers head ball coach as opposed to old ball coach. He would always correct people whenever they said that, which was relatively hilarious. He was great. I was there from 2009 to 2015. I got story after story. We don't have enough time.
Yeah. Anytime we see anything online about Steve Spurrier, man, he's super animated, and I really appreciate his passion and what he's all about, because I think a lot of young student athletes just don't understand that passion, that drive to be the best is really – what it takes to, you can be the 80%, but to be that 10%, man, you got to really have that drive. So listen, for the guests that are new to the Walk On Warrior podcast, kind of give a little rundown on your story.
Sure. So I'm originally from Massachusetts. Where do I start? I played all sports growing up. Played baseball in college, Division I baseball, University of Hartford. Kind of messed around after college trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I always loved, training, the weight room. Oftentimes I loved it even more than actually playing the sport. And I guess I didn't really realize at the time that you could actually do that as a profession, even though I had a strength coach in college named Emil Johnson, who was awesome. And it was about 2 years after, maybe a year and a half after I got out of college, messing around with a bunch of different professions, was in the fire department, managed landscape companies, doing all sorts of stuff. Worked at New York Life. I kind of had an epiphany one day, and I basically just left all those things behind and went back and got my master's degree at Bridgewater State University in strength and conditioning, and worked at a private facility in town for a little bit while I was finishing my master's, and started out at Harvard as an intern. Worked my way up to an assistant position there under Craig Fitzgerald. Then I remember I met Fitz took me to the CSCCA, and I met Joe Ken in Nashville. And he called me a week later and said, "Hey, I got a job at Louisville. Doesn't pay much. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow." And I left and went to Louisville. And I was at Louisville for a year, just shy of a year, actually. And then Fitz actually got the job at South Carolina, and he called me and he said, "Hey, you want to come to South Carolina?" I said, I'll be there tomorrow, and drove down. And then he left after 3 years, and so he left in 2011. And then I took over as director of strength and conditioning there till 2015. Then when the head ball coach hung him up, I went back to University of Massachusetts for 2 years, assistant athletic director for sports performance. That was till 2017, and then 2018, I interviewed out here, and I've been here ever since. We're super fortunate. I'm fortunate to have done 2 long stints at two places. Like 2 7-year stints. I feel like that's pretty atypical in this profession, and I'm grateful and fortunate to still be here with the Sun Devils, and we love it here. And Coach Dillingham's been tremendous. It's year 2 with him, and we're building this thing up the right way. So I know that's brief, man.
Well, when I think of next level coaches, whether it's strength coaches, whether it's position coaches, head coaches, all these different, I always think, people out there don't understand how long of a road it can take, and building relationships and luck. There's a lot of luck that comes involved, and, you got to really be on your, you got to be on your game, P's and Q's. If you're in the right room, it's just, there's such a, like when you talk to some coaches, I was talking to Coach Rivas. He's out here in California, and I asked him how many states he's coached in. he had been to probably like 7 different programs, and they were all in different states. And it's wild because you'll hear of a coach like Mario Cristobal, who was up at Oregon the next year. Then now he's down in Miami. It's such a wild journey that coaches have to, because you see guys, on Saturdays watching games, and you cheer for your team, but you don't realize what those guys actually have had to go through just to get there. It just blows my mind, and I give you guys a lot of respect, man. And so let's talk about, some of these young student athletes are coming out of high school. And I see a lot of different imbalances and things like that, shoulder problems, whatever. Let's talk about high school and how a young student athlete right here, right now, say if they were a junior or say a senior in that area, what they can do right now to physically get themselves prepared, either for a senior year or moving on to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, to me, you see a lot. It's the trends. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media, probably. There's so many gurus out there that, they have a trendy thing that may not be so appropriate for that age demographic. Right. And, it's like the workout of the day, right? This generation has so much access to information, but the problem is it's not filtered and it's not always the right information. So, to me, I think being a master at like simple, basic things and really being a technician with a lot of that. Now that's hard to do for somebody that doesn't necessarily have the resources or have the coaches available to help them do that. But again, same thing, right? The positives and negatives of the internet and YouTube, and, you can find a good resource, and then you can, look up a lot of things online to figure out what's the best way to do a military press. What's the best way to do a squat? What squat should I choose? How do I deadlift? How do I bench press? What rep ranges should I be working in? What intensity should I be using? What tempo should I be using? How do I clean? How do I squat? How do I snatch? How do I do a split jerk? All those different things are, in the old days, you had to have a coach or you had to have somebody teach you. Now you do have more information to be able to find that information out and say, okay, I'm X years old. I don't have a big training age, but I do have a want to, and I can educate myself on a lot of these things. And then obviously books and podcasts, and the amount of information is overwhelming. I mean, I find myself, even in today's day and age, being overwhelmed by how much information I try to process on a given day, because we're constantly trying to improve too. And it's a lot, right? You got to have a day, have a schedule. All that stuff is so important. But for me, just being a master of the basics, just really understanding the technique, what something's supposed to look like, and then being able to video yourself or have a friend video and say, does it look like that or not? All right, how can I change that, right? And you don't necessarily need to know the correct cues. You just need to know, all right, I need to move this here or move this there. And based on this YouTube video that I was watching from a good resource, that's what he said. So maybe I'll try to do that, right? But again, today's day and age too, there's a lot more really, really qualified high school strength coaches as well, which I think is a huge resource and a huge asset. And those guys don't get credit because they're dealing with a huge age range, a huge maturity level range, not only physiologically, but psychologically. And, they really have to manipulate their programs throughout a ninth grader versus a 12th grader versus a swimmer versus a football player. There's so much variability that they could create in there. But at the end of the day, it comes down to being really good at some basic things.
So for those kids that don't have the access of the strength coaches and performance coaches and all that, so how would you weed out what would be good resources online? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's hard, right? And without information like this, that's part of the reason why I wanted to hop on with you today on this podcast, is because there's a lot of bad information out there. There's 40-year-olds getting bad information out there right now, and to me, it's like you look at the OGs, right? You look at the Boyles of the world. You look at the squat universities of the world, the Derek Hansons of the world, the guys that have been doing it a long time and have a track record and a reputation and an education in what they do, right? And I'm always a little leery of anybody that, hey, I'm a biologist and now I give information regarding something that's not necessarily that, or whatever it is, right? And or the people online that all of a sudden pop up and they get 1 million followers overnight, and you're like, wow, this guy must know what he's talking about. And then people start to analyze it, and it's like, well, he's kind of full of crap, and that's the hard thing. So again, it's like doing your homework, doing a little background check on everybody yourself to try to weed through that information. I find myself doing the same thing.
Well, and the one thing is too that you see a lot of these personal coaches, right, or performance gyms or whatever. And I think to a certain degree, I think they do a good job. It's very trendy, flipping tires, sledgehammer. Everybody kind of does something very similar.
Sure.
But when you're dealing with these young student athletes, you're talking about foundations. And what happens, we ended up a lot of times seeing kids with bad habits.
Sure.
Right. They build bad habits and these kind of things. And they will say, well, my coach over here, when I was working with him, he told me this, he told me that. And I know that when you have young student athletes come into your program, you may have to untie the knot per se and actually build those habits again. Talk about, these young student athletes that are doing it. So say they are doing it, but doing it wrong, and how you recorrect that.
Yeah. And that's hard. And I think it's actually kind of a natural progression, right? If I think back to the beginnings when I first started lifting, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was working out with, a football player that was a couple years older than me, and I was just doing what he was doing, and I was probably doing it wrong. I don't remember, but I'm sure I was doing it wrong. But ultimately, you get to a point where you get a coach that, has a good eye and can understand what he's trying to accomplish with the lift. I don't necessarily mind starting from scratch. And, our program's kind of designed that way where, a young athlete's going to be doing something completely different than an athlete that's been in the program for a little while, just based on experience, regardless of whether they were at, I don't know, Allen High School in Texas with, a weight room bigger than ours, and a 5 strength coach is working with them. We're still starting from scratch. So to me, it's about what, for me, our program at, our core values, what do we look for? What do we try to create? What patterns do we want to elicit? How do we build on those patterns to help prepare them for maybe the next stage, whatever that might be? All those things it's a hard deal, but again, like I said, I still think that, with the internet, there's resources available to be able to get a little bit ahead if they don't have somebody to at least lean on for that. But to your point about the performance places too, you're right. A lot of that's cookie cutter money grab stuff. And, ultimately their job is to make them feel like they did a lot and worked hard, and maybe they did, right? But is that what's best for them in the moment? I don't know. Is that the physiological response that they needed at the time? Probably not, but maybe it is. I don't know, so it's a hard thing.
Well, and one thing that I notice is I see there's a parent that could be overbearing, and then you have a kid that's a really good player. My kid's the best player out there. This is what I did. My kid wants to do this. So you have this constant battle with some of these kids, and they almost rebel to a certain degree, man. And so when it comes to these kids, they've got their personal coach. How do you get over a lot of that? Do you have kids that come into the program and say, well, my coach, whatever told me to do this, and so you're telling me this? How do you get over something like that or through it?
It happens all the time, even more so in today's day and age. And shoot, we're working through that right now. We have a lot of new guys in the team, and I should say we sort of worked through it in this last off-season block we had. To me, it comes back to education and your why, right? As a coach, if you can present a good case for the rationale for why you want to do something and make it hit home with that student athlete, that to me that's how you get the buy-in. And that's something we try to present regardless of whether there's pushback or not. To me, if the why is present, then there really isn't a lot of second guessing. And you go back to experience, right? I mean, it's just one of those things that you as a coach, it's good to have, but you also can't just think that they did their homework. You have to constantly tell them the why and the rationale, and hey, give them examples and give them reasons for all the things you're doing, whether or not they agree or disagree. And then ultimately the results. Do the results provide the buy-in, right? Is there progress? Did we improve in, X, Y, and Z areas, so that then they say, okay, this is working. I'm all in. And that to me is when you get them.
Well, I really appreciate what you mentioned earlier about progression. And I think that that's something that kids don't really understand, is everything is it's through a progression, setting the foundation, then going from step A to B to C, and being patient with that. Because when I was saying earlier about having to dial kids back, you have these kids that show up as a 5-star or 4-star, 3-star, whatever the star is, I don't care. But they come into your program and they think, hey, I'm already way up here, and there's only so much I got to do. And one of the biggest things that I hear from coaches, like from football coaches, is they talk about work ethic. And talk a little bit about work ethic coming into a big program like that, and what is expected. What are the expectations?
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
Just briefly on your point, like I've had 4 and 5 stars that were really well prepared, and I've had 4 and 5 stars that had never picked up a barbell in their life or a dumbbell or anything. And again, that kind of goes back to our rationale for why we start everybody at the same spot, which is 0, right? We don't know anything about them. We don't know if they're experienced or not. And the speed of their progression is determined by what we see, not based on what they've done. I will say that I think damn near every recruit that we've got in thinks they're ready for what the expectation is, and none of them are. It's the amount of time that we ask, not only from us, but from the football side of things, from the training side of things, from the academic side of things. I mean, you got to think they're getting ripped out of high school in this instance, and they've been able to kind of do what they want, especially if they're a highly touted recruit. And now they actually have to do exactly what we ask them to do when we ask them to do it on time in the right way. That's a big transition for them, not only just in the weight room or on the field, but in the meeting room, in the classroom. And there's some rough times for a lot of those young athletes to kind of get with the program. Now we provide them with a lot of resources to try to help them with that. And we understand that that's going to happen. But ultimately it's it's a culture thing within the program where there is no other way out other than you can jump in the portal now if you want. But guess what? Wherever you go, they're going to ask you to do the same things for the most part. So you're either going to buy in and you're going to commit to what we do and why we do it, or you can leave.
Well, physical expectations, guys don't, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of things that kids don't know and they're going into the unknown, whether a scholarship player, whether a walk-on player. And that's really the big thing here is I really like to hammer home the transition from high school to college and what the physical expectation is too.
Yeah.
Because for you to be the best on the field, there's no taking your time or being lazy or missing workouts or whatever it is. You have to do it, guys. There's no other way around it. Coach, I came in at about 180. I mean, that's soaking wet at Utah State as a walk-on. And I made a choice because right away I was getting banged up. And I started realizing that when we were even running sprints afterwards, these guys are faster, they're bigger, they're stronger. I'm a freshman. I'm trying to reinvent myself again around these guys that are 21, 22 years old. I'm only, 18? Guys, sometimes it's a rude awakening. And talk about that right there, the transition from a kid having to reinvent himself from a physical standpoint, that decision that he has to make on whether he wants to be the 80% or he wants to be the 10%.
Sure. I mean, it's everything, right? It encompasses your entire day, your entire week, your entire life. And, it's everything from sleep to nutrition, to recovery, to the 2 hours you're with us, to all that. And there's a process and there's a plan for everything, and they have to trust that and follow that. And it takes care of a lot of the issues. Now we have to educate like crazy because, a lot of guys don't know good sleep hygiene. They don't understand. They maybe never seen a lacrosse ball or a foam roller. They may not understand what, the expectation is when we're talking about effort, right? Like if I ask you to give me everything you have, your idea of everything you have is going to be completely different than what my idea of everything you have is typically. And my staff and myself, like that's part of our job is to, at the end of the day, it's to have athletes do more than they thought they could to gain confidence and then do it again. Right. I always use like the Grand Canyon or a cliff as a reference. Right. So, you're constantly looking at this cliff and you're driving towards it. A young athlete might think they're right up next to that cliff about to fall off, but in reality, they're a mile away. And it's my job to make sure they don't fall off, but get them as close to it as they can to experience that. And then what happens is the cliff gets further away. And then you got to move forward again to get to the cliff. So they're never ready, and they always have to do more than they think. To me, a lot of people, there's a process to everything, right? But if you work as hard as you can, and I'm not specifically talking about one particular thing, but if your work is varied and progressed and it's a process and there's variability within it, there's really no such thing as too much work. It's kind of hard to do, especially when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, to say like, oh, they're overtraining. Well, probably not, because they're going to get the weekend off, or they're going to get this, they're going to get that, and they're going to recover and they're going to bounce back because they can. So to me, the work that they have to put in is a lot.
So what would you say is the biggest difference from high school to the highest level in the weight room?
I think the organization of it, the expectation of it, the demand, the technical proficiency, it's no different than a practice, right? So watch film, then you walk through, then you execute in a limited team setting or a one-on-one or 7-on-7 setting or an individual setting, and then you execute it in the team setting. There's a process that goes just like that in the weight room, right? You teach positioning, you teach, activation, you teach technique in pieces. Then eventually you work to a little bit larger piece, and then eventually you work to the whole lift, whatever that is. And there's a progression to everything. So to me, I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of times I'll get a high school coach that's like, "Hey, can you send me your program?" And I'm like, "No, why would I do that?" Because you're just gonna put it on the squat rack, and then your athletes haven't gone through what our athletes have gone through to be able to be capable of doing what we do on a daily basis. So that's always a tough, a lot of coaches don't necessarily understand that. They just want to say, "Oh, well, I'm doing the, ASU football program and we're going to get better." And you might, but you also might hurt somebody. It's not that easy. So the details to me are it's just different, right? Like every rep is scrutinized, every position is scrutinized, it's coached, it's cued, it's repped again, it's repped again, it's repped again, and to get them to understand where they are in space, the positioning of it, how we want it to look. Do we move somebody here or there? Do we elevate a heel here or there? Do we, change the wrist position? Everything is kind of scrutinized on a given rep, on a given set, and we got a lot of eyes in here, which we're fortunate to have. So you can't really escape.
Yeah. Well, I come from a little bit more of the bodybuilding world, and it's all about details. And I think a lot of kids don't understand that everything's got to be very detail oriented, whether it's on the field, whether it's in the weight room, from a safety standpoint too. I mean, you got to be safe when you're doing these kind of things. And that's one thing that I think we could be running into as well when it comes to these high school programs or whatever off-season programs, where they're just going and just doing it, as opposed to saying, hold on a second. It's not about all the weight and trying to beat your buddy out necessarily. It's all about doing it right and slowly progressing, getting better, and getting rid of your ego, so you prevent certain things from happening down the road. Because, Coach, I'd run into guys that I wouldn't say they're dishonest, but we would have in situations where a kid would get ready to come into fall, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just went and shot a basketball and my labrum went out again." And I'm like, what happened? What? And it come to find out, in high school, his senior year, he didn't lift a lot of weights or whatever, but tore his shoulder up, right? And then went out. And so talk about that. Talk about ego, man, and doing things the right way versus just to outdo somebody next to you.
Sure. I mean, dissolving the ego and just trusting the system and the process. To me, that's what great trainees, great players, great athletes, great businessmen, great CEOs, they all do that. And, I was guilty of it early in my career. I had an ego, and I thought, my way was the best way. And that got shot down really fast. And you got to understand that everything works sometimes, and your way of doing things isn't always the best way for that given athlete in that given situation. So you have to educate yourself on what would work in that situation and be able to move. As an athlete, if you come in to our facility with an ego, we'll sniff that out pretty quick. And there's a lot of ways to facilitate the change in ego, to dissolve that ego relatively quickly. But again, it's one of those things where I think they all the guys that I train, when they get here, they have an ego because they've been coddled in the recruiting process, and everybody thinks that they're ready for what they need to do. And it's like I alluded to before, none of them are ready. It's just different. The way we do things is a little different than maybe what they did before. And that's not to say that our way, I think it's better, but I'm not sitting here saying it's the best. I'm just saying it's different. And in order to make that change, you can't have an ego. I don't care how the personal trainer your dad sent you to when you were 16 told you how to do it, because it doesn't matter to me anymore. You have to do it the way we think is best. And that was part of your commitment to the program. So that's the process.
Well, that's another real great point that you bring up, because what I was saying earlier about a kid having to reinvent themselves, I think, when you're going somewhere, you go to a university, all of a sudden now you're kind of by yourself in a way, right? Now you're dialed in, your name's on the dotted line, you're going to Arizona State. But a lot of kids, they don't understand that now you're the freshman again, and you have to work your way back up and build that reputation, not only for, respect on campus with the coaches, with your peers, with your professors, let's be honest, right? Because now you have a spotlight as a kid that's on campus. You're a football player, all these different things. But you got to reinvent yourself every single year. You're being always evaluated in everything that you do. And talk about that, because I know there's kids that get homesick, leave. Just it's too much. Talk about the kids that have a hard time with that transition.
Sure. I mean, you're right in that. I touched on it before, right? Like we ask a lot, and but I also think that good coaches have a little bit of understanding of that as well, right? And we know when it's time to push and when it's time to, challenge, and when it's time to not be scared of failure because you learn from it. And we also know when it's time to put your arm around a student athlete and say, hey, man, I realize this is a lot. I think you're doing a great job. Don't tell anybody I said that, but you're doing a great job. I know you're homesick. I know you've been, ripped out of your comfort zone, and now you're a freshman again, and you're going to get your ass kicked in this spring ball. And, all these guys are older than you, and you feel like you're never going to get to the top of the mountain again, but you are. And the mindset for me is just like, it's just one rep at a time, one exercise at a time, one coaching cue at a time. And it's never personal. It's just business. It's just part of the process, and it's what we do. It's not me picking on an athlete that's not as good as another one. It's me doing my job and coaching that athlete so that they look the way we want them to look, because ultimately that's what we'll be judged on anyway. And that's what the student athlete will be judged on as well. I mean, it's a what have you done for me lately profession, right? And I can't tell you how many times, we've had a recruit come in as a freshman, and, after spring ball, right, they're 3 months in, coach is like, this kid stinks, we got to get rid of him. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Let's give him some time to develop within the program. Let's give him a little bit of support. Let's see what this young man in this instance turns into. And more times than not, after some time has passed, they turn into what we thought they were to begin with. It just took them a little while. That's one of the things I don't love about the portal nowadays, is because they leave without really getting that chance oftentimes, a lot of times. And that's a tough thing too. But the process in particular with my sport, with football, when they're asked to practice and train, and they got to be up early, and they got to do all these things. And, if they're a walk-on, man, they're not getting everything everybody else is getting. They don't have the respect. Coaches might not even know their name, but they got to keep showing up. They got to keep putting themselves in those situations that they're uncomfortable, so that they can try to improve and not make the same mistake twice, and try to just continually check the box and continue to improve, so that ultimately they turn into something that we thought they could be.
Yeah, that's great, man. You're talking a lot about just being humble and then just showing up. I think that's something that really gets overlooked, because in your mind's going to tell you 1,000 reasons not to show up, but it only takes one to actually get there and make it happen, right? but it's finding that one thought to get you to cross that line to actually go through the door and show up. I couldn't tell you how many guys that I've talked to that would say, well, you know what, if I would have done it again, I actually would have did X, Y, Z. And it's so important that talk about fear and guys not crossing that line, and the guilt and the, or just a kid's in your how about this? Kid's in your program right now, but he's afraid to take that extra step, or he's afraid to go one more rep, or he's afraid that coach, how many times you hear this? Coach doesn't like me, so on and so forth. But talk about that kid that, I mean, you might have some stories about that, but that just wouldn't take that next step for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, that is all those things you just alluded to are a you problem, right? That is a personal problem. There's guys in our program now that are too cool for school, right? Young, immature, a little too cool for school. They do everything they're asked to do, but did they take it as serious as they could, right? And that's part of the development process too. I was an idiot when I was 18. I didn't like authority. I pushed back. I was always, and to your point, I would have done a lot of things different, right? And I know that. And oftentimes I'll use myself as an example to some of these young men, because I made a lot of bad decisions too, and I can help you not make those decisions, which maybe will get you what you want to do, get you further to your goal, whatever that might be. If it's playing time, if it's the next level, whatever it is. But it's always interesting when you see finally that switch click, or something happens where all of a sudden they gave the effort, or they did the thing that they thought they couldn't do. And that's when you praise them. And that's when you bring them in and you tell them, hey, that was what we've been talking about for a year and a half. What happened right there on that set. That's what we need now, all the time. Now I know you can do it. Now you have to do it again. And that's where consistency comes in, because once they know they can do it once, guess what? Now I'm going to ask them to do it all the time, and then more. So it's just a snowball effect. And to me, ultimately, what that does is it helps build confidence, and confidence is nothing but positive for certainly for our student athletes. To me, that's forget about sets and reps and everything else. That's our number one job, is to develop confidence in a young man and make sure that they're continuing to push.
That is a great segue. So the player-coach relationship. So we're talking about breaking through fears and feeling more comfortable on a campus, especially for walk-ons or scholarship. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
For you, when you're building relationships with these young student athletes, and hopefully they're not these portal kids that are in and out, whatever, and you have even short-term amount of time to really build a relationship with these guys. And ladies too, right? You're also
right.
But talk about the coach player relationship, and how you get into that real quick, or as quick as you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's about taking time to get to know people and getting to understand what motivates them, what makes them tick, spending time with them. And that goes back to the buy-in and the why also. It's all sort of interconnected. I'm not afraid to say it, that when Coach Edwards was fired here, Coach Dillingham hired me because the players told him to hire me, not because of any other reason. And he met with every single one of our players, and every single one of the players said, you have to keep this staff in place because of the relationship and the connection and and the work also, right? That's also there. But ultimately, to me, it's like I used to say it before I have kids, but now I have two. But it's like I have 120 sons, and every year it cycles where there's 30 more and 30 more and 30 more, and you have to spend the time to get to know these guys during the recruiting process, get to know their families, understand their why, and then you can push buttons systematically to help that development, to make sure that they're getting what they need out of the process. But if the relationship's not there, or I'm an asshole, right, and I don't understand, them, and all I do is yell at them, then you're never, especially not with this generation, you're not going to get the return on your investment that you think you can. So to me, the relationship is the most important thing. It's second to none. It has to be there to create the response you want.
So can you remember specific coaches when you were coming through and how they impacted your life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I absolutely can. And I think that, I've had some really bad ones and I've had some really good ones. And the ones that spent the time to get to know me and to understand how to coach me were the ones that I feel the strongest about. And the ones that just demanded and said, here's what we're doing. This is why, not even necessarily why, this is what we're doing. And sort of were aloof with the relationship piece, were the ones that I didn't really like. And I don't know whether I ever put all my experiences with sort of the philosophy that I use, but I think it has a lot to do with it. Just sort of naturally, as I've developed as a coach over the years, I think that has a lot to do with it. And yeah, I can distinctly remember not playing one sport in particular was lacrosse, right? I gave lacrosse a try. I think I was probably 10 or 11, and I was a hockey player. I played hockey since I was 2 years old. Baseball, football, track. I try to do it all. And I remember going out to lacrosse, and this one coach, I'm 12 years old, and this coach is screaming at me, swearing, calling me this and that. And I'm like, this doesn't seem great, right? And thankfully, I didn't play lacrosse. Now, should I have quit? I don't know. I finished out what I needed to finish out, and then I said, I'm going to go ahead and keep playing baseball because it's a spring sport, and that's what I'm going to do. But would I have had a better experience in lacrosse if that coach wasn't that way? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. No, it's I always bring that up because there's stories like that connect kids to their coaches. And I had an old hippie when I did track back in the day. I grew up in Oregon, and Oregon it's a big track state. And yeah, he's a hippie guy, boy. I tell you, he was a throwing coach, and still to this day, we communicate.
Yeah.
And he didn't know nothing about running, and he don't run nothing, and just building a relationship with that guy. And, it's damn near like a dad to me, man. And
right.
Those are the kind of people that just turn that trigger on, especially when you reach out to them. And, me going from Oregon to Utah, I'm like, oh my God, it's just not working out. I said, no, just stay on, keep driving, keep pushing through. 4 years later, I graduate. I can tell kids today, by pushing through all those boundaries, I went to Tuscaloosa, went to Clemson, went to all these different places. But if I would have quit, so it's important that, we're humble as young student athletes, especially because you just don't know who really cares about you, and you just don't give them a chance. Right. And you want to bail out and take off and do all that kind of stuff. Couple more questions. Talk about when a kid gets to the next level, the pain, the suffering, what you're physically and mentally going to go through in a year-round program at the highest level.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you like a brief synopsis of the schedule, right? So, we start second week of January. We get 8 hours a week from the NCAA. So we train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Each athlete's going to get 2 hours with us every day. Some of the groups are in the morning, some of them are in later morning, but we're a morning team because of the weather. And they do academics in the afternoon, but an athlete's going to be in the building at 6 a.m. They're going to have to get breakfast. If they don't get breakfast and they don't weigh in, then they can't move on to step 2. That's just step 1, right? And then step 2 would be, obviously getting changed, coming down to the weight room. We start the training session. We'll start with some field work. If they don't do the first thing right, we do it again, and then we do it again. And it's kind of predicated on how we're doing that day. And, we'll do an hour of field work, then we transition to the weight room. We do an hour of strength training. And that then when they're done, obviously they have to get their recovery in, they have to get treatment, they have to go to the nutrition bar and do things for our nutritionists, our dietitians. They have to shower, they have to go upstairs, they have to meet with their coaches, they have to transition to academics. After that, they have to be in class or online class at tutors. It's a full day. It's a 10, 12-hour day. And, we train. Our off-season session this year was 12 weeks long. So we had spring break in there too. So really it was 11 weeks of training. And then we start spring football where the 8 hours goes to 20. So now they're in the building even more, and they're practicing and they're strength training. So on a given week, we'll lift 3 days and we'll practice 3 days. And they got meetings, and then they got more meetings, and then they got walkthroughs, and then they got to change real quick, and then they got to transition to the field, and they got to move from point A to point B to point C. And if they don't get point A, they don't get to point B. That's something that we have in place here where there's check marks along the way. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're behind and you just have to start over on a Saturday. That's how we do it, or on a Sunday, or on a Saturday at 9:00 at night, whatever it is. You have to start that process over again because you couldn't get it right to begin with. Spring ball is 5 weeks long. We have about a 3-week break after spring ball in May because the semester's over, and then we start training again at the end of May. We go basically 6 weeks in summer 1, the end of May through June. Our vets get July 4th week off, but our rookies don't. Then we train for 3 straight weeks in July, same thing, 8 hours. Then you're in football camp. Now it's 20 hours again. It's really unlimited when you get to camp. So it's, 3 meetings a day, a weight training session, a practice, 4 meals, 5 meals a day for the entire month of August. Then we start our in-season, right? And in our in-season, it's nice because we only play one day a week, so you can get a really good structure. Monday we're lifting and running, and then we practice. Tuesday we practice. Wednesday we practice. Thursday we lift. Friday we'll do a little regen recovery session, and then we travel, and then Saturday we play, and then Sunday we're back in the facility for more. And if you're a walk-on or you're somebody that's not playing, you're lifting even more than that. You're up early before the sun's up, 5:30. Training sessions for all basically the 60 or so guys that aren't playing all that much. They're in every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and sometimes Friday, depending on if they're traveling or not. And they're practicing, and they're meeting, and they have to do academics. And that literally takes us back to the end of December. And then they get a week off, and then we do it all over again. It starts over again. The cycle starts over again. So you can't mimic that in high school. You just can't. It's not possible. So oftentimes just the time commitment alone is what really weighs on a lot of people.
So if there were 3 non-negotiables, what would they be?
You talking about when they step foot in the weight room, or just in general?
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah. I mean, in the weight room. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, it's intensity, consistency, and commitment. So those 3 things, right? If they can just do those 3 things every day when they wake up and have a good energy level, consistently do it every day, and then be committed to the process and the team, they're going to be fine. There'll be some ups and downs, but everything is going to take care of itself. Those three things.
That's good. So let's see. So a couple more, two questions at least. So give me a story of a young guy that came in that you're like, this guy, I don't know if it's going to work out. He might be undersized. He might be a walk-on. He might be anybody like that. Can you give a story an inspirational story of somebody that came in and, just totally blew you away, shocked you?
Sure. I mean, I got a lot of them. We pride ourselves on development and long-term development still, even in the age of the portal. And in particular with the walk-on group, you get more long-term development because they're walk-ons and they're going to stick around. One of my favorite things, and you talked about it, I think it was in your first sentence, is when a walk-on earns a scholarship and you've poured everything into that walk-on over the course of their lives or their careers, and they earn a scholarship. Man, that brings me to tears. It really does. I've had, a lot of them over the course of my career. There's less and less in today's day and age, unfortunately, because of numbers and NIL and the whole another thing that, really makes it even harder for a walk-on to accomplish that. We have a guy right now who I won't mention his name. He's still a walk-on.
Right.
And, over the last probably 18, 20 months, he's developed tremendously. He's an offensive lineman. He was 255, 260 pounds. Now he's 305 pounds. He actually played for us last year in games. We had a bunch of issues and depth and injuries and a bunch of freak things. And he actually ended up playing and did an awesome job. And he's somebody that anytime I can, I'll stand on the table for him and be like, hey, this guy deserves a little something for what he's done. But you get that every year. You really do, and I had a former assistant that was a walk-on that earned a scholarship. They worked for me and is now doing bigger and better things in strength and conditioning. It happens all the time. And it's not, I say it happens all the time, but it's really hard to get done. It's really hard to accomplish. You have to be that 10%. You have to do all the things we've talked about, and you have to do them all the time. Walk-ons don't get second chances. They don't get second chances because they'll just coaches will just find another one. That's the nature of the profession. And that I try to let them know that immediately because, I said it. I'm gonna say it now. I said it before Dion said it. I've told a walk-on to walk off a few times, right? You're either on the team or you're off the team, and you only get one chance. If you screw up, you get one chance. If you screw up a second time, it's over. And it's not my call. It's going to be the football coach's call to say, we're going to get somebody else. So the stress level and the importance of everything is heightened for that group more than anybody else.
And that's what I'm trying to do, man, is I'm trying to build a community around these type of guys and motivate them, inspire them, keep pushing them even further beyond what they think, because you know how it is on social media. Everybody's blessed to receive whatever, but what is the reality of that?
Right.
And there's a lot of really good players out there that just haven't developed all the way that they need to be to get to that next level. And, it's just timing too. But all right, so I'll get you out of here, but I got a rapid fire question you real quick.
Okay.
I get it. So in all the stops that you've had as a coach, what would be your favorite place and why?
From a family
Everything,
perspective.
just as a great place to be, just
All right.
everything.
Yeah, I mean, I love it here.
Yeah.
The area. The only thing for me is that I'm far away from family, and my wife is far away from family. She's from Massachusetts as well. If family were closer, we'd be in heaven, because the weather, the lifestyle here, the support I have from the football coaches, from Coach Dillingham, from administration, to be able to get to basically do our jobs. The conference we play in now, the new conference we're going to play in, it's the athletes that I get a chance to coach. I like it here.
What's the hottest it's been on the field for you at Arizona State?
Yeah, I think we had, I mean, the hottest day we had was 126. But we weren't out on the field that day. I'm gonna go with 115. I think that's probably accurate. And yeah, that was a warm one. It's a dry heat.
Yeah. Well, some stadiums in hot areas, it's really funny because they actually make the stadium specific to where one side of the field actually covers the home team, and then the other
Yeah,
one
we do
doesn't.
that for sure. Yeah. 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 I'll give you a quick story about that. When we played Michigan State, they came down here a few years back, and man, if I tell you, it was 104 at kickoff at 7:45 at night. And pregame, or maybe it wasn't 7:40, maybe it was 7:30, something like that. But the sun doesn't go down till 8:15, 8:30 around here. So the whole first quarter, they're beaten in the sun. They didn't make it out after halftime. It was, we got I put a big thermometer right outside the visitors' locker room. They put it up on a big screen. I mean, it's like you're in an oven, and there's a hair dryer blowing right in your face, and you can't get away. You can't escape. And I mean, they had, I'm not even joking. I think probably half their team came out after halftime. Everybody else was getting IVs, and our guys, no problem at all, because we're in it. It's a huge advantage for us because we live in it. We train in it. We don't ever usually go inside. We have an indoor facility that we don't use. We're always outside. And to me, it's similar to, and I think a lot of the research also backs this up, it's similar to elevation in that the heat, increases that red blood cell count, the oxygen carrying capabilities. We live in it. It's a progression over the course of the year where it steadily increases. And by the time, the season hits and it's 100 degrees or 105 degrees, it doesn't bother us because we're in it all the time. But other teams really do struggle with that.
Oh my gosh. So when I was in Logan, Utah, we're in that high elevation, and we went and played Hawaii in November.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's freezing in Utah, thin air, no humidity. We get on a plane and go to Honolulu, and we're trying to run all the way across back in the day. What was that, the Aloha Bowl?
Yeah.
We tried to run from one end to the other. By the time we went down there to warm ups, the coach he's over here, hands on his knees, and he's like, we'll just do a couple handoffs and get the hell out of here, man. Yeah. He's like, you can't even breathe. Just that change. And
a lot of teams try to do a lot of stuff. They come out in shorts and a t-shirt, or they do this or they do that, and it's challenging, man. It really is. It's not something that you can train for. It's not something that you can avoid, and it's relentless. It really is. It is a hot place.
What's the most hostile crowd you've been around?
Probably I'm going to go with LSU. When I was in South Carolina, we played LSU on a Thursday night. I believe it was in 2010. It was wild, man. Like D batteries at the bus. I mean, it started right from the time we got anywhere close to the stadium, Tiger Stadium. I mean, it was crazy, and this was back when they still had the Tiger. I mean, it was, Tiger's right outside the tunnel. You're like, what in the, you're running out, and we lost. I think we lost by a field goal. We almost got them, but that was really rough. Anywhere in the SEC, those crowds they're so committed. South Carolina, I mean, I remember back when we were in the Big East, we played at West Virginia. That one was we'll get a chance to go back there, hopefully in the near future, not this year, but that was another one. But Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, A&M, LSU, Arkansas. I mean, all those places are pretty intense. And out here, Washington's a tough crowd. Oregon wasn't bad. Everybody was pretty chill until that song comes on. They play whatever it is in the third quarter.
Shout.
Yeah. And then you get the smell from the stadium. The smoke goes up in the air when everybody's doing their thing. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I've been fortunate to be able to coach in a lot of different conferences in a lot of different places, and it's fun. I tell you what, though, the Territorial Cup here, the rivalry is pretty wicked now. It's intense. The Clemson, South Carolina rivalry was really intense. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So when we went to Alabama, we're coming out of the tunnel, and I'm like, God, what the. Damn, these guys drink a lot. I mean, it's brewery. I'm like, holy, can you let us play?
Yeah.
Fresno?
Yeah.
Fresno, you had to walk through a long parking lot, and they roped it off. That's all it was. And everybody lined this thing. These little kids, what they're saying to us. I'm like, what did you say? Like, I don't know what that meant.
Another one that comes to mind, and this was when I was at UMass, was Troy. We played at Troy, and I mean, I remember, like, if you've ever been there, their stands are like they can reach out and touch you while you're sitting on the bench. They're right there. And I remember there was a Alabama state troopers all right there, and one of our guys, somebody was jawing at him, saying all sorts of crazy stuff, and he looks at the state trooper and he's like, "Are you going to do anything?" And he goes, "Hell no, he's right." And then it was like, so you got no support, and that place was wild too.
Yeah, no, so when I was at Utah State the first year, we went to Troy and we played against DeMarcus Ware, which is that dude, talk about an absolute monster. All right, I'm going to get you out of here, but listen, real quick. So are you like all the other folks from Phoenix when so you got all the Californians that come to Phoenix, and you got all the Phoenix folks that come all the way out to San Diego in the summertime, hang out, take over. It's basically a little Scottsdale, and then come back and go home. Do you come out here too?
I went to so it was during COVID. My wife and I, she was pregnant with our first child. We went to Imperial Beach for a week. That's the only time I've ever been to California for leisure. We usually go to Mexico. Honestly, you can drive to Mexico from Phoenix in 3.5 hours, and you're right on the water. You're in a beach, and your money goes a little bit further than it does in California. So we like that. And I obviously go back to Massachusetts quite a bit too. But all the Californians, I consider myself an Arizonian at this point, so they can stay, in their area, because they are driving up the housing market awful lot here.
Yeah. All right, man. Last one. Hey, listen, if you could go back to when you were younger, or if you could talk to yourself when you were 18, what would you tell that kid as far as doing it differently? If you could do it differently, what would you do?
I think two things. I think number one, don't be scared to try. And number two, don't be afraid to ask. And those two things, like for me, I wasn't a real confident kid. I was always a bigger kid, and I might have looked like I was, but I wasn't. And for me personally, those two things, right? Don't be afraid to just try, because oftentimes once you dip your toe in the water, you're going to jump in, and especially if your experience is good. So that to me is important. And then don't be afraid to ask for anything, whatever it is. Like, hey, what about this, right? Could we, like, it just in general, I think that's sort of human nature, is to just after the fact maybe want something that you could have easily asked for in the moment.
Love it, man. And listen, I really, really appreciate you coming on, and it means a lot to me, but it means even more to the young student athletes as well as parents that are going to be watching this, because I'm really going to hammer it home and really build a community around the parents as well, to get them educated, inspired, and motivated to keep driving their young student athlete to their next level of dreams, if they choose to do so. So, listen, guys, hey, before we get out of here, listen, go to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, Walk-on-Warrior. Like I said, you got to put that dash in there. If not, it sends you to some other strange channel. And and then listen, DustinZeman.com, like I said, products, all the good stuff. Definitely be able to have an opportunity to work one-on-one with me. Go follow Coach Connolly. He's on Facebook. He's on Twitter. It's scrolling across the bottom. Is it the Sun Devils? What's the website? Just to check you out and see what you
Our
got.
website? Shoot, I don't even know. Sun Devil Athletics. Yeah, right. I think it's sundevilathletics.com or .edu. I don't know. I'm not. To your point, I only and now in my life, I only use social media to communicate. The main reason why I have it is to communicate with former players. I think it's the easiest way to communicate with former friends, former players, people that were in your life before. That's the main reason why I have it, as opposed to a lot of people. If not, I would get rid of it, because I spend too much time on there anyway. So, but there you go. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, all that stuff.
Right on. So once again, thanks, Coach Connolly, and I'm going to try to get out there for your seminar. I'm going to try to get out there at the end of the month. So, anyway, but listen, guys. Hey, listen. Like I said, go and subscribe. We got some new videos, new podcasts, new content, everything coming out. Super excited about it, and we're just going to keep getting this thing rolling. And I always like to end our podcast this way. That listen, it's not about me and Coach Connolly. It's about you guys. See you guys in the next episode.